Welcome back to Blackberry News. Please remember to like the video and to make sure you are still subscribed. Science, gut, or a bit of both. According to Penn State professor Michael Mann, one of the world's most renowned climate scientists, Bendel's grasp of the climate science is deeply flawed. Of course, Michael Mann would say that because Michael Mann is, one of those please don't scare the children type people. Please don't alarm the citizens. Please don't, scare people because they might not want to take action or something. To me, this paper is a perfect storm of misguidedness and wrong-headedness, he told me, because, why? Bendel's original paper had been rejected for publication by the peer-reviewed Sustainability, Accounting, Management, and Policy Journal, according to Bendel. The changes that editorial reviewer said were necessary to make the article fit for publication made no sense. But among them, one referee questioned whether Bendel's presentation of climate data actually supported his conclusion. I'm not sure that the extensive presentation of climate data supports the core argument of the paper in a meaningful way. And what have you to support that statement, dear referee? In his response, sent in the form of a letter to the journal's chief editor, Bendel wrote, "Yet the summary of science is the core of the paper, as everything then flows from conclusion of that analysis. Note that the science I summarize is about what is happening right now, rather than models or theories of complex adaptive systems, which the reviewer would have preferred." But in Mann's view, the paper's failure to pass peer review was not simply because it didn't fit outmoded academic etiquette, but for the far more serious reason that it lacks scientific rigor. Bendel, he said, is simply wrong on the science and impacts. There's no credible evidence that we face inevitable near-term collapse. So both Michael Mann and whoever this, Mann said that, and this referee, they're just saying he's just wrong. Why? Why is he wrong? Where's your logic? Where's your reasoning? Other than, well, I just don't see it. I don't want to put the pieces together myself and call it what it is. Dr. Gavin Smith, head of the NASA's Goddard Institute for Space Studies, who is also world famous, was even more scathing. There are both valid points and unjustified statements throughout. He told me about Bendel's paper. Model projections have not underestimated temperature changes. Not everything that is nonlinear is therefore out of control. Okay. But if it's nonlinear, somehow it's in control, it's totally fine. Blaming increased volatility from more energy in the atmosphere for anything is silly. The evidence for inevitable societal collapse is very weak to non-existent. What's silly are the things that these people are saying about this paper, because, you're just saying stuff. You're just like, no, I'm sorry. I don't know. Schmidt did not rule out that we are likely to see more instances of local collapse events. Obviously, we have seen such collapses in specific locations associated with extreme storm impacts, he said. He listed off a number of examples: Puerto Rico, Barbuda, Haiti, and New Orleans, explaining that while local collapses in certain regions could be possible, it's a much harder case to make at a global level. And this paper doesn't make it. I'm not particularly sanguine about what is going to happen, but this is not based on anything real. But, the fact that we've lost 80 to 90% of insects in, very far-flung from each other regions of the world, that doesn't speak to, that's not a data point that shows you that we're in deep trouble. That's totally fine. Jeremy Lent, systems theorist and author of, the fact that we're near a blue ocean event, that's, totally fine. we're just going to chug right along with these really major events happening. Jeremy Lent, systems theorist and author of The Patterning Instinct, A Cultural History of Humanity's Search for Meaning, argues that throughout Bendel's paper, he frequently slips between the terms inevitable, probably, and likely. If he chooses to go with his gut instinct and conclude collapse is inevitable, he has every right to do so, Lent said, but I believe it's irresponsible to package this as a scientifically valid conclusion and thereby criticize those who interpret the data otherwise as being in denial. I'm not in denial. You're in denial. No, I'm not in denial. You're in denial. When I pressed Bendel on the issue, he pushed back against the idea that he was putting forward a hard, scientifically valid forecast, describing it as a guess. I say in the original paper that I'm only guessing at when social collapse will occur. I have said or written that every time I mention that time horizon. But why offer this guess at all? The problem I have with the argument that I should not give a time horizon like 10 years is that not deciding on a time horizon acts as a psychological escape from facing our predicament. If we can push this problem out to 2050 or 2040 or 2050, it somehow feels less pressing. Yet look around. Already harvests are failing because of weather made worse by climate change. Bendel points out that such impacts are already damaging more vulnerable, poorer societies than our own. He says it is only a matter of time before they damage the normal functioning of most countries in the world. This article goes, this video is already pretty long, and this article goes way longer, way longer. Sorry. Let me go back. I'm gonna pop through some of these headline sections just to keep this video short, but you guys get the idea. I think global food system failure, according to Dr. Wolfgang Knorr, principal investigator at Lund's University's Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services in a Changing Climate program, the risk of near-term collapse should be taken far more seriously by climate scientists, given the fact that so much is unknown about climate tipping points. I'm not saying that Bendel is right or wrong, but the criticism of Bendel's points focuses too much on the detail and in that way studiously tries to avoid the bigger picture. And I was just about to say, scientists like to what am I trying to say? Scientists like to compartmentalize things instead of, look at a holistic picture of the data and the evidence, widen the lens. The available data points to the fact that some catastrophic climate change is inevitable. Moving on down, the catastrophic do-nothing scenario. A few years ago, though, I discovered firsthand that a catastrophic collapse of the global food system is possible in coming decades if we don't change course. At the time, I was visiting research fellow at Anglia Ruskin University's Global Sustainability Institute, and I had been invited to a steering committee meeting for the Institute's Global Research Observatory, a research program developing new models of global crisis. One particular model, the DAW Global Security Model, was focused on the risk of another global food crisis similar to what triggered the Arab Spring. We ran the model forward to the year 2040 along a business-as-usual trajectory based on do-nothing trends, that is, without any feedback loops, that would change the underlying trend, said Institute Director Aled Jones to the group of stakeholders in the room, which included UK government officials. The results show that based on plausible climate trends and a total failure to change course, the global food supply system would face catastrophic losses and an unprecedented epidemic of food riots. In the scenario, global society essentially collapses as food production falls permanently short of consumption. Oh my. And also here's another great quote. Climate models we've been using are not too alarmist. They are consistently too conservative. And we have only recently understood how bad the situation really is. Climate Tipping Points, a new study by a team of scientists at Oxford, Bristol, and Austria, concludes that our current carbon emissions trajectory hugely increases this risk. Published in October in the journal Agricultural Systems, the study warns that the rise in global average temperatures is increasing the likelihood of production shocks affecting an increasingly interconnected global food system. Surpassing the 1.5 C threshold could potentially trigger major production losses of millions of tons of maize, wheat, and soybean. Also note that this year we have seen very high levels of methane escaping the Arctic, sometimes measuring 9 times higher than the global average. And what is this going to do to global temperatures in the next year? If next year brings us an El Nino, what does this do to global temperatures, and how does that in turn affect crop production in the next 2 to 3 years? Moving on to the next section, limits to growth. One of the most famous scientific forecasts of collapse was conducted nearly 50 years ago by a team of scientists at MIT. I think they're talking about the models they ran in the 70s. Their limits to growth LTG model, known as World 3, captured the interplay between exponential population and economic growth and the consumption of raw materials and natural resources. Climate change is an implicit feature of the model. LTG implied that business as usual would lead to civilizational breakdown sometime between the second decade and middle of the 21st century due to overconsumption of natural resources, far beyond their rate of renewal. This would escalate costs, diminish returns, and accelerate environmental waste, ecosystem damage, and global heating. With more capital diverted to the cost of extracting resources, less is left to invest in industry and other social goods, driving long-term economic decline and political unrest. Next section, growth, complexity, and resource crisis. What if then collapse is not necessarily the end? That's the view of Ugo Bardi of the University of Florence, who has developed perhaps the most intriguing new scientific framework for understanding collapse. Earlier this year, Bardi and his team co-wrote a paper in the journal Biophysical Economics and Resource Quality, drawing on the work of anthropologist Joseph Tainter at Utah State University's Department of Environment and Society. Tainter's seminal book, The Collapse of Complex Societies, concluded that societies collapse when their investments in social complexity reach a point of diminishing marginal returns. Tainter studied the fall of the Western Roman Empire, Mayan civilization, and Chaco civilization. As societies develop more complex and specialized bureaucracies to solve emerging problems, these new layers of problem-solving infrastructure generate new orders of problems. Further infrastructure is then developed to solve those problems, and the spiral of growth escalates. As each new layer also requires new energy subsidy, greater consumption of resources, it eventually cannot produce enough resources to both sustain itself and resolve the problems generated. The result is that society collapses to a new equilibrium by shedding layers of complex infrastructure amassed in previous centuries. This descent takes between decades and centuries. Moving on to the next section, beyond collapse. Is there a way out of this self-destructive amplifying feedback loop? Bardi's work suggests there might be, that collapse can pave the way for a new, more viable form of civilization. Whether or not countries and regions experience collapses, crisis, droughts, famine, violence, and war as a result of ongoing climate chaos. Many people think that, the quickest way we can move forward or evolve or get to the next stage is to encourage the collapse of the existing structure sooner rather than later, instead of propping up the existing structure. I'd have to agree with that, especially economically. We're going to have an economic collapse, so why not just collapse the economy with the understanding that, there's no way we need to go to some kind of steady state or degrowth economy. So, give up the growth economy right away. Very little, if anything, is being done to stop emissions and general destruction of the ecosystem. We hold these truths to be self-evident. On our current trajectory, he said, the effects of the destruction we are wreaking on the ecosystem could cause humans to go extinct, the ultimate Seneca collapse. But if we change course, even if we do not avoid serious crisis, we might lessen the blow of a potential collapse. In the scenario, the coming collapse will be just one more of the series of previous collapses that affected human civilizations. It might lead to a new rebound. Next section, release and renewal. The lesson is that even if collapse is imminent, all may not be lost. Systems theorist Jeremy Lent, author of The Patterning Instinct, draws on the work of the late University of Florida ecologist C.S. Halling, whose detailed study of natural ecosystems led him to formulate a general theory of social change known as the adaptive cycle. Complex systems, whether in nature or in human societies, pass through 4 phases in their life cycle, writes Lent. First is a rapid growth phase of innovation and opportunity for new structures. Second is a phase of stability and consolidation, during which these structures become brittle and resistant to change. Third is a release phase consisting of breakdown, generating chaos and uncertainty. The fourth is reorganization, opening up the possibility that small, seemingly insignificant forces might drastically change the future of the forthcoming new cycle.
Okay, Daddy.
Most of all, the emerging science of collapse suggests that civilization in its current form, premised on endless growth and massive inequalities, is unlikely to survive this century. It will either evolve into or be succeeded by a new configuration, perhaps an ecological civilization. That sounds really nice. An ecological civilization premised on a fundamentally new relationship with the earth and all its inhabitants, or it will, whether slowly or more abruptly, regress and contract. What happens next is still up to us. Our choices today will not merely write our own futures. They determine who we are and what our descendants will be capable of becoming. As we look ahead, this strange new science hints to us at a momentous opportunity to become agents of change for an emerging paradigm of life and society that embraces, not exploits, the earth, because doing so is now a matter of survival. Hope you all enjoyed the information in that. This is an extremely long article. I didn't even read the whole thing. I kind of skimmed through sections of it. Obviously, I broke this up into 2 sections. If you missed the first section, go back and find the video that I just did previous to this, and that will have the first part of this. I broke this up into about 2 15 or 16 minute or so, whatever, give or take a few minutes, videos. I hope you enjoyed this. Thank you so much for your eyes, your ears, and your conscience. If you would like to support this channel, you can do so at the links below. Until next time, peace.